Thanks for coming. I'm just going to give it a this is what we'll be doing today. And just to let me know for sure, could you please just tick your green tick icons to let me know that you can hear me? Okay, great. It's going up, good. Keep ticking. I'm also going to use a little pointer on this screen. It should be on or next to Macmillan webinar. And October the 2nd, me, and the title, Scripted Conversations. Hopefully you can see this moving around too. As Henry said, there'll be time for questions at the end, so please send Henry any questions you'd like to ask using your chat box, and he will field them and at the end send them to me or ask me directly and we can look at them. And the slides, just to confirm, the slides will be available as well at the end. Henry will tell you how to get them. Okay, so it looks like pretty much everyone is okay, which is nice. So here we are, scripted conversations. In this webinar, I'm going to look at these questions really. What are they? How can they be used? And what are the benefits? And perhaps most importantly at the end, I'll be looking at implications for the classroom and what this means for using scripted conversations with our students in the classroom. Just one more quick question for you before I carry on. Am I speaking too quickly? Can you hear me okay? If I'm speaking all right, please click the green check box. And if I'm speaking too quickly, please cross the red cross box. If you'd rather I didn't say anything, that's fine too. Okay, thank you for that. Now, some of you may know who I am, some of you may not. This is me before I started teaching, when I still had a lot of hope for the world and promise, and you can see on the screen what it's done to me. This is basically what a life of teaching has done to a face over time. I started in Italy. In 1988, I worked for a chain called Berlitz, and for about 6 months. Then I went to Portugal, and I worked there for a year and a half for language schools, one called Cambridge School, one called the British School, I think, and then Spain with the British Council for a year, then Hong Kong for the British Council, and I was at a university called Nihon University in Japan for 3 years. And in between all of those, I was back in the UK teaching at language schools. So I've got a broad range. In the UK, of course, it's multilingual, multinational classes. And most of these groups here were all monolingual. So I've got a mixture of experience. Some of the groups in Japan were as many as 100 in a class. That was pretty good. For a writing class, 100 students, you know, take that. Others would be one-to-one. Most groups in Europe were between 10 and 30, say. Anyway, in 1997, when I was still in Japan, I started writing. And in 2000, I became a full-time writer, and I've been struggling and suffering ever since. These are some of the books that I've done, you may know. Reading Keys for Macmillan, 3-level reading skills course, and for CUP, the real skills series, listening and speaking 1, 3 and 4. Also the exercises in English grammar and use. This is Q, I hope we've one of those levels. A few other things, Breakthrough Plus for Macmillan down here, Listening Extra, and quizzes, questionnaires and puzzles. For CUP, teacher resource books, photocopyable materials, and most recently I've been focusing on the TOEIC test, pass the TOEIC test. Oh, and messages over here, just one of those levels I help with. So, let's have a look at what are scripted conversations, and basically what I mean by scripted conversations, I mean both fully scripted and partially scripted. Some people separate them. I mean anything with text in, long and short, dialogues, meaning there are 2 people involved, and they can be seen and read, so they are texts in themselves, but, and this is the most important thing, they are intended to be spoken. So this is where we differ from a reading text. These texts are intended to be spoken. Now, this is a parrot, and I had a big problem when I started looking at scripted conversations, trying to decide what the difference was for my students between speaking and talking. Now, to me, speaking was simply parroting other people's language, other people's words. And this was the problem I had at the beginning. I couldn't understand the benefit of asking my students to read words that were given for them. To me, that was not talking. Talking was more communicative. It was students exchanging their own ideas and opinions, whereas simply speaking, parroting other people's words off a page, I saw no value in whatsoever. And I think there's still many teachers who look at scripted conversations and they just think, what's the value in that? Why would I want my students to be reading the words off a page that somebody else has written? Where's the benefit? Where's the communication? That took me a long time to resolve. But what I realized is that you've got to think of scripted conversations as a scaffolding tool. They are a means to an end. They are not an end in themselves. So basically, scripted conversations are a springboard towards free fluency and communication, genuine personalization. They are not an end, they are a means to an end. And many people who look at them in books and think, oh, that's rubbish, don't understand the purpose. They are basically a scaffolding tool. They are one step on the way. And once you understand that, and once other teachers understand that, and the function of scripted conversations is clear, then the benefits can be shown, and they're quite obvious, in fact. And it's good to explain that first, and to explain that it's a step. It's not simply, let's do this scripted conversation, fine, now let's do something else. They are a means to an end. So let's quickly look at how can scripted conversations be used. Well, one way I use quite a lot in my classes is a dictogloss, which you probably know. Maybe you don't call it that. But I would take a small, short conversation and play it to the students. They can't see it at this point. It's a blind dictation, if you like. After you play it once, ask them to write down what they want, what they heard. They will look at you as if you're an idiot and you don't know what you're doing, but encourage them to write down any words they remember. Then play it again and ask them to fill out some of the missing words, and then play it for a third time, and they hopefully complete maybe 90% of the conversation. Now the key here is it shouldn't be a long conversation. This would be an example of the type of thing I would use. Quite short. But as I said, play it once and they write down what they remember. Play it a second time and they fill it in. Play it a third time, they do a bit more. They can then compare with their partner, and then you would show them the whole script at the end. Now that focuses on various listening skills, you know, listening for detailed, specific words, but mainly it's an introduction into what you're going to do with this conversation. It's just a starter, if you like. Encourage them not to panic and try it once or twice, and remember keep it short. And I think that's something that works. It probably works the best with a smaller group. There's also a running dictation, which you probably know. For a running dictation, you would take the text and you would put it outside the classroom. You would put students into pairs and you say, okay, you're A, you are B. A, go out, read your line, come back to the classroom and dictate the line to your partner. So B, you do the same, and they keep going out of the classroom and in the classroom, memorizing small chunks of text until they complete the scripted conversation. Now obviously that's going to be a short conversation like this, and you have to be careful that in their excitement they don't kill each other going in and out of the door, especially if you have a large group. You may also want to put maybe 3 or 4 copies outside so that they aren't all crowding around the same area. But it's a good thing to do for teenagers and young adults, and kids too. Running dictation. Another version of that would be a jigsaw dictation, where you blank out the whole of A, and you give that piece of paper to student B, and then you blank out B, and you give that to student A, and they dictate to each other and write in their half-finished text the rest of the conversation. A jigsaw dictation. Gap fill is the most common and obvious thing to do with the text. In this case, this is the same text that we just looked at, and we've gapped out some text, some words. So you would play the tape, or play the recording, and then they would listen for specific words and fill it in. Now, those ways are fairly simple and short, and they should be quick ways to introduce the scripted conversation. They are not the activity itself. The real fun begins in the post-activity, if you like, where you're looking at pronunciation, stress, rhythm, intonation. This is where you distinguish a scripted conversation from a written text. So far, all of those activities, they could be done with any text, not necessarily a conversation. But from this point, this is where the activity becomes more specific to scripted conversations, because we're looking at how you bring this text alive now, how you work on pronunciation, stress, rhythm, intonation, to build up students' confidence in using the language. So here is the same text. Imagine that they have completed their text either with a dictogloss or a gap fill or the jigsaw listening or the running dictation, but here they are with their finished text. So there are various ways you can work on pronunciation, and you shouldn't be shy of doing so. For example, what I would do is just start with, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. Students would hopefully repeat, or they go, what? In which case, excuse me, excuse me. How much? How much? Much earrings. Where's the stress? Much and earrings. How much are those earrings? How much are those earrings? The schwa are those. How much are those earrings? Or chunking, you could say. How much are those earrings? Sounds like somebody's name. Hello, my name's how much are those earrings? How much are those earrings? How much are those earrings? They're £45. They're £45. They're very popular. Very popular. They're very popular. They're from France. They're from France. Intonation you could use. Oh really? Or oh really? So it depends. Excuse me, how much are those earrings? They're from, sorry, I'll start again. Excuse me, how much are those earrings? They're £45. They're very popular. They're from France. Oh really? Oh really? And what about that necklace? Necklace. That necklace. About that necklace. What about that necklace? What about that necklace? That's called back chaining, where you start at the end of the sentence and you hop back one by one. That's quite good fun, and it varies the drill. Necklace. That necklace. About that necklace. What about that necklace? What about that necklace? How much is that? How much is that? Intonation rising at the end of the question. How much is that? Oh really? And what about that necklace? How much is that? So you get the idea. There's a lot you can do to demonstrate stress, much, earrings, how much are those earrings, intonation. Oh really? Oh really? Rhythm, and what about that necklace? And what about that necklace? Back chaining, necklace, that necklace, about that necklace, what about that necklace, and what about that necklace? And at that point, you can stop being the model and you can hand it over to them. And the boys could be A, the girls could be B, or the left side of the class could be A, and the right side of the class could be B. Or, of course, you put them into pairs, student A, student B, and they do it just with their partner. There's a huge amount of good and productive work that you can do at this point with a scripted conversation, and it's easy to overlook it, but if you try it once or twice and you enjoy it, then your students will too, that's for sure. So let's just try, imagine I'm the teacher or I'm you in the classroom, and you're the class. I'm going to ask you to listen and repeat. Excuse me, how much are those earrings? Earrings, those earrings, are those earrings? Much are those earrings? How much are those earrings? Excuse me, how much are those earrings? They're £45. They're £45. They're very popular. They're very popular. They're from France. They're from France. Excuse me, how much are those earrings? They're £45. They're very popular. They're from France. Oh really? Oh really? Oh really? Necklace. That necklace. About that necklace. What about that necklace? What about that necklace? Oh really? And what about that necklace? How much is that? It's £79. It's very good. Here, take a look. Great, thanks. Now, it has to be a short conversation or a section of a longer conversation. You have to enjoy it, and you have to interact with the class at that point, and you become a model, and then you pass it to them. I think working on pronunciation, stress, rhythm, intonation gives students valuable practice It's safe because they don't need to think. They're just using their voices and they're trying to pronounce things in the right way. And it's fun. It's a bit of a breather. You know, they're not having to worry if they're right or are they wrong. What's the answer? It's not like that. And it's working on sounding natural, which is what a lot of students really appreciate. The ability to pronounce what they're saying so that others can understand them easily and to sound more natural when they speak in English. So, Pictogloss, running dictation, or jigsaw dictation, gap fill. Finally, the next stage is we're leading towards a substitution drill. Basically, these ways are ways of introducing the text to the students. Then you look at pronunciation, stress, rhythm, intonation, and then moving on to a substitution drill gives them extensive practice. So this is the same conversation. After doing all of that, they now substitute 1, 2, 3 times. So, excuse me, how much are those shoes? How much are those sunglasses? How much are those small bags? Now we're in dollars. They're $65. They're $49.95. They're $19.50. This is a 3 substitution drill. And I love this kind of thing. Why? Well, a few years ago when I would look at this, I would think, well, there's no value in that. It's just parroting. Remember the parrot. In fact, we're on a step here towards fluency, and this is a really good part where students can forget all about the teacher. The pressure is completely off your shoulders. You don't have to feel the class is waiting on your every word. They're in pairs. They've completed the conversation. They've heard the conversation on the audio. They've practiced the conversation with the techniques you use for pronunciation, stress, rhythm, and so on. And they're ready to go, and here they go. This is probably, you know, depending on the class, between 5 minutes, 8 minutes of time when you are free to walk around the classroom and help people with individual problems, to answer individual questions. In large classes especially, that is appreciated. And not, you know, students don't get time to ask questions, but here they might say, well, how do I pronounce this? Is it popular or popular? Popular. Oh, thank you. You know, you can help people individually. And the students are practicing and they're enjoying the language. So again, it's about enjoying the language. A lot of language learning is stressful. Stressful for the teacher and stressful for the students. If you think it's bad for you sometimes, just put yourself in the position of the students. This kind of activity, a scripted conversation, which they've learned not by rote because the content isn't so important, but they've learned to say these words naturally. They've practiced their stress, their rhythm, their intonation, and they've practiced with a partner. That kind of thing is really good. The pressure's off now. The pressure's off the students and it's off the teacher, and it's just about enjoying the language. Now, substitution drills help to develop fluency. They build confidence, something that a lot of students lack, and again, they're enjoying themselves in the classroom. Now, it's about what learners expect when they come to the classroom. They expect to speak English, but if they are at a very low level, that's tough. And they're not going to like it because they'll be worried about, are they making mistakes, or what word do they need? But scripted conversations remove the stress. Students aren't worrying about grammar or vocabulary or what to say, or they aren't having to come up with ideas. What they're doing is they're enjoying the language. They want to sound natural, and this is sometimes we forget, something we forget. I forget it a lot. It's easy when you can speak the language as you all can, and you can communicate very well it's easy to forget that our students don't have that confidence. They worry that they will not be understood when they're speaking English, and they don't want to lose faith. They want to sound natural. How can they do that? Well, scripted conversations are a great way to help boost their confidence. Now, you've seen this down here. This is the only phrase I remember from 8 weeks of intensive Mandarin Chinese study in a class of 12 as a student. And a few years ago, I enrolled to learn Mandarin Chinese as a beginner in order to put myself in the position of a student, which I think is a terrifying place to be. And it was a disaster. Actually, the class started with about 18. It quickly went down to a hardcore of 12, and then they drifted off. And in the end, on the final lesson, there were 4 people, 4 students, me included, and the teacher, who was not happy. The problem was we never got to speak. We never got a chance to say anything. There was no role play. There were no scripted conversations. We went through the sounds of the language and vocabulary words, and that was it. It's extremely demotivating for students not to be able to speak. They want to speak and they want to sound natural. So this Tado Pringwo Fe Changbo is the only phrase that we were actually taught. And do you know what it means? It means his apples are many. His apples are many. He has many apples. Now, how functional is that? That's amazing, isn't it? 8 weeks, intensive study. We didn't have scripted conversations, and if we had, we would have come away with a lot more to say, and I think that class would have had a much better atmosphere than it did at the end. I feel sorry for the teacher, but I also feel slightly angry as a student, because it was my time and money, and yet it was wasted. If the teacher had tried in another way, she was using an advanced course book, in terms of being a recent course book. We were beginners, but the course book itself was not archaic. It was a modern course book. But she didn't spend any time on conversations and pair work and things. So, that really brought home to me that we have to think about what learners want as well as what we want from them. Do you recognize this dog? This is a beagle. Beagles are mad. We looked after a beagle, my wife and I, and we love it to bits. But it's a completely mad dog. It's here because there's a phrase in English you probably know. A dog isn't just for Christmas, it's for life. And when I heard that, I thought of scripted conversations. They aren't just for lower levels, they're for everyone. Scripted conversations are not just for lower levels, they are for everyone. Higher levels can benefit in the same way. Certainly when it comes to all the pronunciation, intonation work, but also in the type of exercise. You can develop the exercises with the level of the students. This is a longer scripted conversation. I wouldn't use a dictogloss or a jigsaw dictation, maybe. I wouldn't do anything. A running dictation, it's too long for that. It's a little bit too long for a running dictation. We're not training them for a marathon. But what I would do is look at the grammar. Here we are asking students to predict, and the grammar is about articles, a and the, or no article. So this is just a way to introduce the text. If a man and a woman are walking toward a door, who do you expect to open it? The man or the woman? I'd expect the man to open it, I guess. See? You think women aren't as strong as men. So you get the idea. They are using a scripted conversation, but this time they're thinking about the grammar, and you have gapped out the grammar focus. That's the good thing about scripted conversations. You can choose your focus. It could be vocabulary, it could be grammar, you could be looking at verbs, nouns, adverbs. They could be, predicting what tense is missing, that kind of thing. In this case, articles. But this is a higher level exercise for a higher level student. Still a scripted conversation. And when they've completed that, you can have all the fun of doing the stress, the intonation, the pronunciation, and so on as well. Here, we're showcasing target language. So we've got what's he like, the verb to be like, and we've got what does he look like, and the verb to look like. So we're just showcasing those two bits of grammar there, for example. Or we could look at fillers and idiomatic language, especially as you go up towards the advanced levels. Words like, hey, anyway, well, that's too bad. No way. You're kidding, right? You can take a conversation and you can pull out these fillers and idiomatic language and show students how they're used in a natural way, and it helps them understand that to be more fluent is not simply about speaking quickly. To sound more natural isn't always about being clear when you talk. There are fillers and idiomatic languages that you can throw in, which are far more important. It annoys me a lot when students swear, for example. I find it intensely annoying, not because I don't believe swearing has its place in a language. I think it does, and we all swear. But to swear in a foreign language is a supreme art form. You have to know when, you have to know how, you have to know which word, you have to know how to express it, and it's extremely rare to come across somebody who can swear well in a foreign language. Now why? The question is, why do people, language learners, our students, want to swear sometimes? It's because they want to sound natural. They want to feel as if they're part of the language and not looking at the language from a distance. Perfectly natural thing to do. What I say is it's not about whether you can swear or not. It's about using idioms and conversational fillers and links and things like that. And at the higher levels, that's what they want. And you can show them that in scripted conversations. Now the next thing is that the higher you go, the more students can take ownership of the conversation itself. They can change key details. They can change the names. They can change the places. They can change the events. They can bring a little bit of creativity and originality to the scripted conversation. You shouldn't look at scripted conversations as being a static piece of language. They are there to be used in any way students can use them. And if they want to change some parts, as many of my students do, they will change the names to their own names. They'll change the cities to the city where they're in. They will change, the problem to a problem they had recently. They can be used for that purpose for higher level students with that motivation. So you can personalize scripted conversations. You can make them personal to each and every student. And the other thing is you can ask them to continue the conversation with a partner. So now they are improvising. They are coming up with their own ideas. How does the conversation continue? How does it finish? What's the conclusion? You can put them into pairs, give them 5 minutes to continue the conversation together, and then have them role play their conversations to each other. Each time they role play the conversation, they are repeating in a more and more confident and natural way the language that they've been using. So don't see scripted conversations as only for lower level students, and don't see them as static pieces of language that are fixed. They are for all levels, and they are just as creative as anything else in the language classroom. Now, I can't show you video through this system, but I will send Henry these 2 video samples, or 3, if I can find the other one, and you can see what happens in the classroom, how students role play these conversations and put their own ideas in. This is the case where they changed the location and changed the names and so on to their own names. They personalized it. This is a conversation where they kept it the same, but they really went to town. They memorized it as much as they could. They make mistakes sometimes. Sometimes they use other language, which is just as good. It's not about being true to the scripted conversation and repeating it exactly. It's about feeding off the spirit of the conversation and the language it contains to make your own dialogues. So if you go to Henry and ask him, he will direct you, and you can see how these students coped. In this case, she was from Turkey and she was from Spain, and I didn't think they would want to do it, but they did, and they didn't mind being filmed. This is the first time they'd ever done anything like it, and you can see the result. These couple, they're from Taiwan, and they practiced it quite a lot, and they really got into the role play element. And same here. Anyway, they're just to show you how students cope very well with scripted conversations in the classroom. So, using scripted conversations helps students to develop their fluency, to build their confidence, to have fun, to sound natural, and to be creative. That's basically the point I'm making here. Back to the parrot. You remember the parrot? It's not simply, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. There's a lot more to scripted conversations than parroting meaningless words. But this is the real point I want to make today, is all of those ideas are good on how to use scripted conversations with dictogloss and running dictation, jigsaw dictation, gap fill, looking at the grammar, practicing with the pronunciation. They're all fine. But where does it go? Where does it go? It has to go somewhere. You have to be heading in a direction. You can't just do that, walk off and say, okay, let's do something else. Here's the next activity. A scripted conversation is, it's a stepping stone to something else, and you have to get to the something else. The something else, of course, is free fluency. The opposite, almost, of the typical idea of a scripted conversation. But that's the journey that you're taking students on. You're going from controlled practice with a scripted conversation to semi-controlled practice, where they're starting to feel more free and maybe using other words or ideas, to personalization and to fluency. That's the journey. So it's a stepping stone. Remember, it's not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. The end is fluency. So the question is, how do we get there? Well, you have to have a careful sequence, I think, in order to achieve what you're going for. And this is, after 3 years of hard work, the sequence that I think works very well in the classroom. So we would start with a scripted conversation, which showcases the target grammar in context. We would then add vocabulary so that students have some useful words and phrases they can use. We then have a substitution drill, you remember, with we can practice the pronunciation, the stress and the rhythm, the intonation, and then we can have a substitution drill which includes the grammar and the vocabulary to make them more confident. We can then take away a little bit of the scaffolding and have semi-controlled practice, a gap fill or a pair work information gap activity. Then something a little bit less controlled, so you pull away a little bit more of the scaffolding. And then a listening, which showcases again the language in a natural context. And then they're in a position to use the language, personalize it, and run off and play with it themselves. That is the sequence for using scripted conversations as a stepping stone to fluency. Now, what does this look like in the classroom? When you put all of these elements together, as a teacher you can, of course, do it yourself. And a lot of teachers like to use their own materials. And I would still encourage this sequence, starting with a conversation, which you would probably have to do yourselves to showcase what you're trying to do. Add some vocabulary, drill it, take away some support with less controlled practice, a listening, and then free practice. I would use that sequence, and that's what I did in Breakthrough Plus. So this is why Macmillan have asked me to do this, is to explain a little bit about that background. Don't panic. I'm not going to try and sell you the course. I'm only going to mention how all of the principles that we covered up to now, and we're approaching question time. Please think of some questions, send them to Henry. But I want to show you how all of those principles that I've looked at and we've examined up to now work in the classroom, ideally in my view. Start with the topic, get some visuals to get some to inspire students a little bit, a brief warm-up based on the pictures, and then here is the scripted conversation. This is quite long. A lot of people think scripted conversations are only short, you know, hi, how are you, I'm fine, thanks. No, this is a scripted conversation, it's pretty hefty. Now it showcases the target grammar, and if they need more grammar practice they go to the back of the book. Then they have more vocabulary around the topic, so you're boosting the amount of words they have at their disposal. This is the substitution drill, which I love. 10 minutes of time in the classroom when you can go around and help students individually, think about lunch or whatever it is you want to do, but students are practicing. And this is when you can have fun with all the stress and rhythm and intonation work. Communication activity is the less controlled part, so it's an information gap. They go to the back for that. And then there's this, which is, again, less controlled. They've got the grammar, they've got the vocabulary, and now, using these visual prompts, they are putting the grammar and the vocabulary together and making their own sentences. They can approach this any way they like. They could look at this picture and talk about it with their partner, or this one, or that one. The important thing is they have the grammar, they have the vocabulary, they've looked at the language they need, they've drilled the language so they're confident they can pronounce it, the words and phrases correctly. And so you're sort of nudging them towards free fluency here, and then give them a listening, somebody else, using the language, but a bit of cultural background as well, make it more interesting. And then finally, personalization and fluency. So here we are at the fluency stage, and yet we started with a scripted conversation. So if you leave this session with no other memory whatsoever, please let it simply be that you can use scripted conversations in order to achieve fluency in students. And I think it's the journey that you take between one and the other, and how you choose to use the scripted conversations, and when you introduce the grammar and the vocabulary, how much support you give, whether you ask them to use visual prompts or make notes or whatever the less controlled activity is. Whatever the route is, the aim is always for students to use their own ideas and come up with their own words and express themselves. Scripted conversations do not stifle creativity, they actually help it. It's the ultimate goal of a scripted conversation to be completely forgotten, and yet the student to be talking away 10 to the dozen. So this is the basic principle that underlies the course, Breakthrough Plus. Focus on listening and speaking, but support it with grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Grammar, because students want to be accurate, quite naturally. Vocabulary, because they need the words to help them put their ideas across. Pronunciation, because when they talk they want to be understood. But all of that supporting listening and speaking, not in place of, supporting it. So communication and getting their ideas across is the goal. And then an expansion, in other words, a kind of supporting element. If they want extra practice for listening or for reading or for writing or more vocabulary, according to the needs of each class, then in Breakthrough Plus, each unit has an expansion section with extra listening, extra vocabulary, reading, writing tasks, and so on. Because you can't ignore those skills. You still have to acknowledge them. But if the focus is communication, then so be it. Let's keep the focus on listening and speaking. So that's it. The result is Breakthrough Plus, which is a course that I took about, over 3 years working on. It's founded on scripted conversations. And just to repeat myself yet again, it shows how a scripted conversation is not a straitjacket that students can't escape from, but a springboard that will help them achieve fluency so that they can express themselves in the way that they would like. Thank you very much. Now, let's see if Henry, or Caroline, as he used to be called, has any questions for us.
Yeah, hi Miles, well done. Thank you for this session. Can everyone hear me? I hope they can. Give me a yes if you can hear. Right. Yeah, looks like you can. Great. Okay. Yes, Miles, we had a few questions come in for you. three or four, in fact. Let me just start with those. So, first was, what do you do with students who are already good at English? Won't they become bored with the constant repetition?
Yes, they will if you constantly ask them to repeat. But the higher the level, then the less repetition, but the more you can use scripted conversations as a springboard, as an example, if you like, for students to work from. It could be an example, and then the more advanced students can take that, change it, completely change it, and prepare their own role plays based on it. Or, as I said, continue the conversation using their own ideas. That question may have come in at the beginning when we were looking at how to use scripted conversations for lower level classes. Where lower level classes need repetition, they like it, it makes them feel more confident. They don't want endless repetition. This is one string to a teacher's bow. But yeah, lower level repetition is good because they're becoming more familiar and more confident with the language. Higher level, they don't need that. You could focus on the idiomatic language, the conversation fillers, that kind of thing. And you could say, yeah, let's use some of these in a conversation. Well, anyway, you're kidding, right? You know, those kind of phrases. Yeah, so don't make them endlessly repeat. That's not the idea.
Sounds good, Miles. Another question we had was about the appropriate length. So what's the right length to make the scripted conversations most efficient, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, for if you want for lower level students, I would say 5 or 6 lines is enough, and you're introducing the grammar and the vocabulary using the scripted conversation as a vehicle, and then you can do the dictogloss or the jigsaw or the running dictation or a gap fill, for example. Don't make it longer than that. If you're writing them yourself, it's pretty tricky stuff, and it takes a long time to think of a topic and how to express that and what language you want, and make it interesting and to make it natural. It's not an easy process. So the longer the conversation you try and do yourself, the harder. But at the higher levels, you can use authentic language. Why not? You know, take a clip off the internet, or record a conversation between 2 friends, and simply ask students to pull out the language that you want them to focus on, maybe a tense, for example, present perfect or simple past, or maybe conversational fillers, or maybe the vocabulary, you know, any words to do with whatever the topic is. It's hard work doing all that yourself, which is why, you know, it took 3 years to do Breakthrough Plus. But the point is, the conversation can be short or long. It depends what you want to do with it.
Sounds good, yeah. Next question that came in was about shy students, Miles. Someone asked,
I think that's a very, very good question. And in fact, in my experience, it's the opposite. The problem you have with shy students is they are reluctant to talk. And so in a group, or even in a pair with a more confident student, it's the more confident student that does all the talking. And the shy student just sits there and listens. A scripted conversation is perfect because you have A and B. You know, it evens out that balance. You don't get one student hogging the entire activity. It's pretty much 50-50. So however shy the student is, they're able to fulfill half of the task along with their partner in a scripted conversation, an A-B conversation. I also think you need to think or ask yourself why the student is shy. It might be that they don't like being put on the spot, and they don't like having to come up with ideas instantly. Maybe that's just not them, even in their own language. And so it's more comfortable for them to sort of take a back seat and not say so much. Scripted conversations, again, help address that by giving students the confidence, the crutch that they need in order to progress.
Probably got time for one or two more questions. Another one I've seen that's come in, Miles, is asking for an example of scaffolding. Is there any examples you can give us quickly?
Well, scaffolding is a term used in the same way as support. And basically, ultimate scaffolding is a scripted conversation because they have everything they need. And then you take that scaffolding away by blanking out the words or by introducing images instead of words. For example, here, images instead of words. That is the scripted conversation being de-scaffolded, if you like. And then here, personalization and free fluency, no scaffolding. Scaffolding means support. So it's how much help you want to give students. It means structured support in the activity itself. So an information gap, by definition, will have some information and it will have some gaps. So the scaffolding, the support, is the information that you have. The more or less of that, the more or less scaffolded it is. Yeah, don't get confused by the terminology. I don't really like scaffolding, but that's what it's called. Imagine a building with poles around it to help it during its construction, and then removing those as the building becomes more complete. That's all. How much vocabulary you give them, how much grammar help you give them beforehand. The point is, don't simply ask students at the beginning of the class, have you ever been to a foreign country? That's the end point. You see what I mean? All of this is scaffolding. Everything that goes before the activity that you want to finish with, the fluency activity, is scaffolding.
Perfect. Okay, Miles, I think that sums up things nicely. I'm getting lots of people asking about the certificate now, so I'm going to
and can you tell
post
them
the link to that in the chat box.
Videos as well, in case they want to look at those. Thanks, Henry.
Yeah, Miles,
okay.
Could you...
All right, guys, I'll just say goodbye. Thank you very much for dropping in. It's been great. And if you want to email me, check with Henry. He can forward them on, and I'd be happy to respond to any other queries you have. And whatever you use, whether it's scripted conversations or Grade 2 Plus or whatever course, good luck with your teaching, and I hope you enjoy it. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, Miles. So, yeah. Hope you all enjoyed the session today. I've posted the link to the certificate in the chat box. I'm just going to share it on the whiteboard now as well. So all you need to do is save this, print it off at home and add your name to it and sign it. The link is appearing in the chat box again now. Don't worry if you've not got time to do this now. We'll send around an email later today with that same link in it too, and that will also include details of how you'll be able to watch the recording of the session, which will go up on our website and the YouTube channel too. As well as that, there'll be an area where you can download Miles's slides from, and I'll make sure that we include the information on those two videos that he was talking about as well. So thanks again for coming along. Do keep checking back our website. We've got an online conference coming up at the start of November, which will include a week's worth of webinars, so I'm sure you'd be interested to come along to those as well.